My wife believed her friend's lies and threw me out. I returned weeks later, but not with an apology. That's the short version of how a 10-year marriage ended over fake screenshots and manufactured drama. I'm Alex, 34, and I teach freelance photography workshops around the city, something I genuinely love because it combines my passion for the craft with helping others discover their creative potential. I walked into our apartment Sunday evening after a weekend workshop, camera bag slung over my shoulder, expecting Jennifer's usual, "How did it go?" greeting. Instead, I found her sitting rigidly on our couch with her best friend Stephanie positioned beside her like some kind of emotional support soldier. The atmosphere felt charged, wrong, like walking into a funeral where you're the deceased. "We need to talk," Jennifer said, her voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, cold and accusatory. "About what happened at the dinner party last week." I set down my equipment, confused. "What about it? Everyone had a good time, right?" That's when Stephanie launched into her performance, complete with trembling voice and strategic tears. She claimed I'd cornered her in our kitchen during the party, made unwelcome advances, and followed up with inappropriate messages afterward. "I have the texts right here," she said, pulling out her phone with screenshots that looked convincing but felt completely foreign to me. I stared at the messages allegedly from my number, reading words I'd never written, seeing a conversation I'd never had. "Jennifer, this is insane. I never sent these. Let me show you my actual phone." But Jennifer was already shaking her head, her face set in stone. "Stephanie showed me everything. She's been afraid to tell me, but she couldn't keep quiet anymore." I felt like I was drowning in confusion and disbelief. "You're taking her word over mine?" Without even looking at evidence. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 10 years, who knew my character better than anyone, was choosing to believe elaborate fiction over asking basic questions. Stephanie's tears intensified right on cue. "I knew you'd deny it. That's why I was scared to say anything. Men like you always make women look crazy when they speak up." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost impressive, but Jennifer was buying every word. "I can't have someone like this in my home," Jennifer declared, standing up like she was pronouncing a verdict. "I want you out tonight." I looked at my wife, searching for any trace of the woman who used to trust me, who would have demanded proof before destroying our marriage. "You're really going to kick me out based on fake screenshots? Without investigating anything?" Her response crushed whatever hope I had left. "Stephanie has no reason to lie. You need to leave now, and we'll figure out the rest later." I packed a bag in stunned silence while they whispered in the living room, occasionally shooting glances my way like I was some predator they were brave enough to confront. As I headed for the door, I made one last attempt at reason. "Jennifer, just look at my phone records. Check the actual message logs. This whole thing falls apart with 5 minutes of fact-checking." She wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Just go, Alex. I can't look at you right now." I left my own home carrying a single duffel bag, my marriage apparently over because my wife preferred comfortable lies to uncomfortable questions. I ended up at my college roommate Rick's place that night, sitting on his couch at midnight trying to process what had just happened to my life. Rick listened to the whole story while making coffee, then said exactly what I needed to hear. "This sounds like complete bullshit, and we're going to prove it." The next morning, I called attorney Ms. Torres, a sharp family law specialist Rick's cousin had recommended. She listened to my account with professional calm, taking notes and asking pointed questions about timelines and evidence. "First thing we do is preserve everything," she said. "Your phone records, social media activity, financial transactions. If this woman fabricated evidence, there will be inconsistencies we can exploit." I spent the next week methodically building my defense case like a photographer organizing a shoot, gathering every piece of documentation I could find. My actual message history with Stephanie was practically non-existent. A few group chat responses and basic pleasantries, nothing remotely inappropriate. I screenshotted everything, downloaded my call logs, and compiled financial records showing I was teaching workshops during several times Stephanie claimed incidents occurred. My photography students became unexpected character witnesses, offering testimonials about my professionalism and integrity during classes. "Mr. Alex is always respectful," wrote Maria, one of my regular students. He maintains appropriate boundaries and creates a safe learning environment for everyone. Ms. Torres was particularly interested when I mentioned the dinner party details. Walk me through that evening again. Who was where, what conversations happened, any witnesses to interactions. That's when Rick dropped a bombshell I hadn't expected. Actually, I saw something that night, he said during one of our strategy sessions. When Jennifer went to the kitchen to get dessert, Stephanie moved closer to you on the couch. She was definitely flirting, touching your arm, leaning in way too close. I remember thinking it was inappropriate given Jennifer was right there. This revelation shifted everything. Rick had witnessed Stephanie's actual behavior that contradicted her victim narrative completely. She was definitely the aggressor, he continued. You kept scooting away and redirecting conversation back to the group. If anything, you looked uncomfortable with her attention. Ms. Torres smiled grimly. Now we're getting somewhere. Inappropriate behavior often gets projected onto the victim when the real aggressor gets rejected. I started digging deeper into Stephanie's background, something I probably should have done years ago as Jennifer's friend. Her social media revealed a pattern of drama and attention-seeking behavior, with multiple posts about toxic men and betrayal by people you trust. More concerning was recent activity showing her targeting married men in our social circle, posting flirty comments on their photos and initiating private conversations. Look at this. I showed Ms. Torres screenshots of Stephanie's Instagram activity. She's been commenting on 3 different married guys' posts with heart eyes emojis and suggestive messages. This isn't random, it's a pattern. The timeline also revealed something crucial. Stephanie had gone through a messy breakup just 2 months before the dinner party, after her boyfriend caught her cheating. Her ex had posted about it publicly before deleting everything, but mutual friends confirmed she'd been spiraling since then, desperately seeking male attention and validation. Classic displacement behavior, Ms. Torres noted. She targets unavailable men because rejection from them feels less personal than from single guys. When you didn't respond to her advances, she decided to destroy what you had instead. By the end of week 2, I had assembled a comprehensive case file that painted Stephanie as a manipulative woman with a history of fabricating drama when she didn't get her way. The fake screenshots she'd shown Jennifer had metadata inconsistencies, her timeline didn't match my documented whereabouts, and Rick's eyewitness testimony completely contradicted her claims. I felt confident we could prove my innocence, but the real question remained whether Jennifer would care about truth once her comfortable narrative got shattered. Jennifer's call came exactly 2 weeks after she'd thrown me out, her voice carrying that familiar tone she used when she wanted something. Alex, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Morrison's Coffee tomorrow at 2? Morrison's was our place, where we'd had our first date, where I'd proposed 3 years later. She was trying to use emotional geography to manipulate me, which told me everything about her current mindset. I'll be there, I said, but I didn't mention I wouldn't be coming alone. Ms. Torres and I arrived 15 minutes early, taking a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Remember, she coached me quietly, let her talk first. People reveal more when they think they're in control. Jennifer walked in looking confident, almost triumphant, like she expected to find a broken man ready to beg for forgiveness. Her face shifted when she spotted Ms. Torres sitting beside me, professional briefcase open on the table between us. Alex, what is this? I thought we were meeting privately. Her voice carried an edge of panic that hadn't been there on the phone. This is my attorney, Ms. Torres. Given the serious accusations that ended our marriage, I thought legal representation was appropriate. Jennifer's eyes darted between us, her confidence visibly cracking. You brought a lawyer to a coffee meeting? That seems pretty dramatic, don't you think? Ms. Torres smiled politely. What's dramatic is accusing someone of sexual harassment without evidence. We're here to discuss facts, not feelings. The conversation took a sharp turn when Jennifer tried to regain control. Look, maybe we can work through this. Stephanie feels bad about how everything happened, and I think with some counseling, I interrupted her mid-sentence. Before we discuss reconciliation, let's address the evidence. I slid printed phone records across the table. These are my actual message logs with Stephanie. As you can see, we exchanged exactly 4 text messages in the past year, all group logistics about dinner plans. Jennifer barely glanced at the papers. Anyone can fake phone records nowadays. Ms. Torres leaned forward. Actually, these came directly from the cellular provider with authentication stamps. What's interesting is the metadata on Stephanie's screenshots shows they were created using a text generator app. The color drained from Jennifer's face, but she doubled down instead of admitting error. So now you're saying Stephanie somehow created fake evidence just to hurt you? That's ridiculous, Alex. She has no reason to lie. That's when I played our strongest card. Funny you should mention that restaurant incident Stephanie described from last Thursday night. I pulled security footage from Romano's. Jennifer's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Security footage? Ms. Torres opened her laptop, turning the screen toward Jennifer. The footage shows Stephanie having dinner with her ex-boyfriend that night, the same evening she claimed Alex cornered her in the bathroom. She wasn't even at the restaurant. The silence stretched for nearly a minute while Jennifer stared at the screen, watching Stephanie laugh and hold hands with someone who definitely wasn't me. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I don't understand. Why would she lie about something so serious? I felt a mix of vindication and sadness watching my wife of 10 years grapple with reality. Because she's been targeting married men in our friend group for months, Jennifer. Because she couldn't handle being rejected, so she decided to destroy what I had instead. Jennifer's hands started shaking as the implications hit her. You're saying I threw away our marriage over lies? That I chose Stephanie's word over yours based on nothing? Ms. Torres's voice remained professional but firm. Mrs. Henderson, your husband provided substantial evidence of his innocence within hours of the accusation. You chose not to examine it. The meeting deteriorated from there, with Jennifer oscillating between defensive anger and desperate bargaining. This has to be some kind of mistake. Maybe the security footage is wrong, or maybe Stephanie was confused about the dates. I watched my wife twist herself into logical pretzels rather than admit she'd been completely wrong about the most important decision of our marriage. Jennifer, I said finally, my voice calmer than I felt, you believed elaborate lies over 10 years of knowing my character. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage actually meant to you. She started crying then, real tears this time, but I felt nothing watching them fall. The woman who'd destroyed our relationship without investigation was now asking me to fix what she'd broken. Alex, please. I made a mistake, but we can get past this. I love you. Ms. Torres closed her briefcase with a decisive click. We'll be filing divorce papers tomorrow morning. This meeting is over. The call from Ms. Torres came 3 days later while I was setting up equipment for a portrait session, her voice carrying an excitement I'd rarely heard from my usually composed attorney. Alex, you need to sit down for this. Stephanie's whole house of cards just collapsed. I excused myself from the client and stepped outside. What happened? She launched into the most satisfying explanation I'd received in weeks. Another victim came forward. A coworker named David from Stephanie's previous job filed a complaint with HR about similar false accusations she made against him last year. Same pattern, fake screenshots, manufactured evidence, claims of inappropriate behavior after he rejected her advances. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly composed photograph. So this isn't her first time playing this game. Ms. Torres continued with obvious satisfaction. It gets better. HR investigated thoroughly back then and discovered she'd been using the same text generator app to create fake evidence. They have documentation of everything, including her confession when confronted with proof. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with anger at how easily this could have been prevented. Where's Jennifer in all this? The answer came in the form of an emergency meeting at Ms. Torres's office that afternoon, with Jennifer sitting across from us looking like she'd aged 5 years in 3 days. Her hands shook as she clutched a folder of documents, her previous confidence completely shattered. I spoke with Stephanie yesterday, Jennifer began, her voice barely audible. She admitted everything. The screenshots, the stories, all of it was fabricated. Ms. Torres leaned forward. Tell him exactly what she said. Jennifer's composure cracked as she recounted the conversation. She said she'd been planning this for months, ever since the dinner party when you didn't respond to her advances. She was jealous of our marriage, of how stable and happy we seemed compared to her constant relationship drama. The revelation that Stephanie had deliberately targeted our marriage with premeditated lies hit harder than I'd expected. She actually admitted to planning this? Jennifer nodded miserably. She said she wanted to prove that all men are the same, that even the good ones like you would eventually show their true colors. When you didn't, she decided to manufacture evidence instead. I stared at my wife, watching her grapple with the magnitude of her mistake. So you destroyed our marriage because your friend was jealous and wanted to drag us down to her level. The tears started flowing then, but they felt manipulative rather than genuine. Alex, I know I made a terrible mistake. I should have trusted you, should have investigated before making accusations. But we can fix this now that we know the truth. Ms. Torres's voice cut through Jennifer's pleading. Mrs. Henderson, your husband's reputation and business have suffered significant damage due to these false accusations. Several workshop participants canceled, and he lost potential contracts. The business impact was something I'd been trying not to think about, but she was right. 3 regular students had quietly stopped attending, and 2 corporate photography gigs had mysteriously evaporated after Jennifer shared Stephanie's lies with mutual friends. I can fix that, Jennifer said desperately. I'll tell everyone the truth, post on social media, whatever it takes to clear your name. I looked at this woman I'd shared 10 years with, feeling nothing but tired disappointment. Jennifer, you chose to believe elaborate lies over a decade of knowing my character. You threw me out of our home without asking a single follow-up question. The damage to our relationship isn't something you can fix with a Facebook post. She reached across the table toward me, but I pulled my hands back. But I know the truth now. Stephanie confessed everything. We can start over, go to counseling, rebuild what we had. The desperate hope in her voice might have moved me weeks ago, but too much had changed. What we had was built on conditional trust. You only believed in me when it was convenient, when your friend wasn't whispering poison in your ear. Ms. Torres added the final nail to the coffin. There's also the matter of Stephanie's previous victim. David lost his job and had to relocate due to the false accusations. This pattern of behavior was documented and available if anyone had bothered to investigate. Jennifer's face went white as the implications sank in. You're saying this could have been prevented if I'd just done basic fact-checking? I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. That's exactly what we're saying. Your friend destroyed multiple lives with fabricated evidence, and you helped her do it by choosing not to think critically. The meeting ended with Jennifer begging for another chance while I signed preliminary divorce documents. Ms. Torres walked me to the elevator afterward, her expression sympathetic but firm. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. Your wife made her choice when she decided Stephanie's word was worth more than your marriage. As the elevator doors closed, I realized I felt relief rather than sadness. The woman who'd thrown away our marriage over lies wasn't someone I wanted to spend my future with anyway. The divorce proceedings moved with surprising speed once Jennifer realized she had no legal ground to stand on, her attorney apparently advising her that fighting a case built on proven lies would only make things worse. I threw myself into rebuilding my photography business, relocating to a studio space in the arts district where nobody knew about the scandal that had temporarily derailed my career. The move turned out to be the best decision I'd made in years, putting me closer to the creative community I'd always wanted to be part of. Within a month, I discovered that several of my former workshop students had been searching for me, reaching out through my website to ask when classes would resume. We never believed those rumors, Maria wrote in an email that made me smile for the first time in weeks. You've always been professional and supportive. Some of us want to organize a group to follow your workshops wherever you go. The loyalty of these students, who'd seen my character through consistent interactions over months and years, meant more than any legal vindication could. I started offering weekend workshops in landscape photography, driving to state parks and nature preserves where I could focus on the technical and artistic aspects I loved most. Jennifer's attempts at reconciliation became increasingly desperate as the divorce finalized, each effort filtered through mutual friends who seemed uncomfortable being messengers. "She wants you to know she's told everyone the truth about what happened," Rick reported after running into her at a grocery store. "She's posting on social media about how wrong she was, trying to clear your name publicly." The irony wasn't lost on me that she was now fighting harder to save my reputation than she'd fought to protect it when it actually mattered. "She asked if you'd consider counseling," Lisa mentioned during a coffee meeting, clearly uncomfortable with being Jennifer's envoy. "She thinks if you both could just sit down and work through everything." I cut her off gently. The time for working through things was when she threw me out without investigation. I'm not interested in rebuilding trust with someone who had none to begin with. The legal settlement ended up favoring me significantly, partly because Jennifer's actions had damaged my business relationships and partly because Ms. Torres was exceptionally good at her job. I received the larger share of our joint assets, plus compensation for lost income during the scandal period. More importantly, I retained full rights to my photography equipment and client list, ensuring my business could continue without interference. The strangest encounter came 3 months after the divorce was final, when I ran into Stephanie at Morrison Camera Supply while shopping for new lenses. She looked terrible, weight loss, dark circles under her eyes, the kind of appearance that suggested her life had fallen apart completely. "Alex," she said, approaching cautiously like I might call security. "I know you probably don't want to see me, but I needed to apologize for everything that happened." I continued examining the lens I'd been considering, not acknowledging her presence beyond a brief glance. I was in a really dark place after my breakup, and I made terrible decisions that hurt innocent people. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know I regret everything. The desperation in her voice might have triggered sympathy if she hadn't destroyed my marriage with calculated lies, but I felt nothing looking at her now. "What I did to you and Jennifer was unforgivable. I see that now. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I sabotaged other people's happiness." I picked up the lens I wanted and walked toward the checkout counter without responding, treating her like the stranger she'd always been beneath the friendly facade. "Alex, please. Just acknowledge that you heard me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to know you understand that I'm genuinely sorry." I paid for my purchase and left the store without speaking a single word to her, feeling no satisfaction from her obvious distress but no sympathy either. Some people simply burn too many bridges to warrant basic courtesy, and Stephanie had earned her place on that list through deliberate cruelty rather than simple mistakes. 6 months post-divorce, I'd established something I'd never had during my marriage, a thriving photography studio that reflected my actual interests rather than compromises made for domestic harmony. The new space featured a proper darkroom for film photography, something I'd always wanted but Jennifer had considered an unnecessary expense and waste of space. My specialty had evolved toward nature and landscape work that took me out of the city frequently, shooting sunrise sessions in the mountains and extended camping trips to capture wildlife in natural settings. The irony wasn't lost on me that the scandal had forced me to relocate and rebuild, ultimately leading to the creative freedom I'd been craving for years. My reputation not only recovered but grew stronger, partly due to how professionally I'd handled the crisis and partly because my new work showed a depth and passion that clients immediately recognized. "Your portfolio has this authenticity now that wasn't there before," commented James, a gallery owner who'd started featuring my landscape prints. "Like you found your voice by going through something difficult." The business success felt meaningful because it was built on merit rather than obligation, with clients choosing my work because they genuinely valued what I created. Jennifer's final attempt at contact came through a handwritten letter delivered to my studio on a Tuesday morning, her familiar handwriting on cream-colored stationery that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I recognized her careful script immediately but didn't open the envelope, instead writing "Return to sender, chapter closed" across the front and dropping it back in the outgoing mail slot. Whatever desperate plea or attempted justification the letter contained wasn't something I needed to read, and sending it back unopened felt like the cleanest way to communicate that our story had ended permanently. Rick helped me move into a house the following weekend, a small craftsman-style place with enough yard space for outdoor equipment storage and a basement perfect for my expanded darkroom setup. "This feels like the life you actually wanted," he observed while we assembled shelving units for my camera gear. "Remember how Jennifer used to complain about your equipment taking up space? Now you've got an entire room dedicated to it." The house represented something Jennifer had never understood: the difference between building a life around shared passions versus building one around social expectations and material accumulation. Sarah entered my life gradually, first as a client booking pet portraits for her veterinary clinic, then as someone who genuinely appreciated my work and perspective on photography. She was a veterinary technologist with her own practice, financially independent and refreshingly direct about her interest in getting to know me better. "I heard through the grapevine that you went through a difficult divorce," she mentioned during our third coffee meeting, her tone matter-of-fact rather than fishing for drama. "I appreciate that you've been honest about your past rather than pretending it didn't happen." Our relationship developed with the kind of natural progression I'd forgotten was possible, built on actual compatibility rather than physical attraction and convenient timing. Sarah understood creative passion because she had her own calling, respected boundaries because she maintained them herself, and showed interest in my photography because she genuinely found it interesting rather than obligatory. "I love watching you work," she told me during a weekend shoot at a local nature preserve. "You have this focus and patience that's completely different from your everyday personality. It's like seeing who you really are underneath everything else." 6 months into dating Sarah, I realized I'd learned something crucial about relationships. The right person doesn't make you feel grateful they tolerate you, they make you feel valued for exactly who you are. Jennifer had spent years making me feel like my interests were burdens to be managed, while Sarah treated them as assets that enriched both our lives. A year later, the updates about Jennifer and Stephanie's downward trajectories reached me through Rick, who seemed to take perverse pleasure in reporting their respective failures. Jennifer lost her marketing job, he mentioned during one of our regular Friday drinks. Apparently the drama affected her workplace relationships when word spread about what really happened. Her boss didn't appreciate having an employee who made such poor judgment calls in her personal life. I felt no satisfaction hearing about her professional struggles, having genuinely moved beyond caring about her fate one way or another. "And Stephanie moved to Phoenix after getting exposed publicly," Rick continued. "Someone posted screenshots of her confession on social media, and it went viral in our friend group. She couldn't show her face anywhere without people knowing what she'd done." The complete collapse of both their lives felt like natural consequences rather than revenge, the predictable result of choices they'd made without considering long-term implications. My own life had evolved in directions I couldn't have imagined during the darkest days of the scandal, proving that sometimes destruction clears space for something better to grow. The gallery showing for my landscape photography series opened on a crisp October evening, with 30 prints displayed in a converted warehouse space that perfectly complemented the natural themes I'd been exploring. Sarah stood beside me during the opening reception, wearing a blue dress that complemented her confidence as she discussed my work with potential buyers who seemed genuinely interested in the artistic vision rather than just decorative wall art. "These captures have this quality of solitude that feels intentional rather than lonely," I heard one collector tell his companion while examining a sunrise shot from the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Like the photographer found peace in isolation and managed to share that feeling through the image." Halfway through the evening, I spotted a familiar figure near the back of the gallery space, Jennifer standing alone by my favorite piece from the collection, a black and white forest scene taken during a solo camping trip last spring. She looked older, more worn down than I remembered, studying the photograph with an expression I couldn't quite read from across the room. My first instinct was concern that she might cause a scene, but watching her for several minutes revealed someone who seemed genuinely absorbed in the artwork rather than plotting disruption. When our eyes met across the gallery space, I felt nothing more significant than the mild recognition you'd show an old acquaintance, no anger or hurt or nostalgia, just acknowledgement that we'd once known each other in a different life. She approached slowly, clearly uncertain about whether I'd welcome conversation. "Alex, these photographs are incredible. I never realized how talented you really were when we were together." Her voice carried genuine admiration mixed with what sounded like regret, but not the manipulative kind I'd grown accustomed to during our marriage. "Thank you. I replied simply, not offering any opening for deeper conversation but not being deliberately rude either. I always knew you were good at photography, but seeing this collection displayed properly shows me how much I missed about who you really are as an artist. The admission contained layers of recognition about our failed relationship that she'd never acknowledged before, but it felt too late to matter in any meaningful way. Sarah appeared beside me then, sliding her arm through mine with natural ease. The gallery owner wants to discuss a permanent display arrangement, she said, smiling warmly at Jennifer despite clearly recognizing who she was. Alex's work deserves a wider audience than these quarterly shows can provide. Jennifer's expression shifted as she processed the dynamic between Sarah and me, seeing the kind of supportive partnership she'd never offered during our decade together. Well, congratulations on your success, she said quietly, stepping back toward the exit. You deserve all the recognition your work is getting. As she walked away, I realized I felt genuinely indifferent to her presence, neither pleased nor disturbed by the encounter. The woman who'd once been the center of my world had become simply another person in a crowded room, someone whose opinion no longer carried weight in my life decisions. Was that difficult? Sarah asked gently as we watched Jennifer disappear into the October night. Not really, I answered honestly. It felt like meeting a stranger who happened to know some old stories about me. The gallery showing sold 15 prints that night, enough to fund my next photography expedition and validate the artistic direction I'd been pursuing since rebuilding my life from scratch. Driving home with Sarah, I reflected on how the betrayal that had seemed catastrophic at the time had ultimately freed me from a relationship that was slowly suffocating my creative spirit and authentic self.